Okay. The dates for the next three history nights are shown here. In October, we will have guest speaker Scott Mingus sharing Civil War stories associated with this area. The next April History Night, I will be speaking on housing developments in the southwest section of the township. So that'll include Old East York, Fayfield, and Green Acres. A little housekeeping. Yeah, what is Green Acres? You'll find out. A little housekeeping. Please silence your phones. The restrooms are located through that door and back the hallway to your left. Other than when I ask a question of this group, I would appreciate if you'd hold your comments until after the talk. I will be asking questions a couple times, so please respond in kind. As with all history nights, this event is being recorded with the content viewable several weeks later on the township's website as a YouTube video. History nights are a venue of the Springettsbury Township Historic Preservation Committee. Our committee was established 34 years ago by the Board of Supervisors at the time of Springettsbury's centennial to identify historically significant structures and sites while generating interest in and documenting the township's history. Our committee consists of up to 9 members appointed by the Board of Supervisors. We presently have a full contingent of 9 members. Now, I'm Stephen H. Smith, the chairman of the Springettsbury Township Historic Preservation Committee, and I am presenting the program tonight. Now, tonight I'll be exploring the history, variation, and interesting stories of barns at 10 sites in the township. After I acknowledge the primary sources for this presentation, the first barn explored will be this barn, shown in the title slide. So here are my sources. I use sources from the York County History Center, where some of the photographs came from, archives of the Springettsbury Township Historic Preservation Committee, where actually a lot of the photographs came from. Library of Congress had some photos. Cliff Shatterwaith artwork is also included. York County Recorder of Deeds was used in the research. Newspapers.com was a great resource to use in the period newspaper articles of several of the barns. Old photos and postcards from my collections and also those submitted to my York's Past blog. So, this is the first of several works of art by Cliff Shatterwaith, used with his permission in this presentation. On May 12, 1972, Cliff created this plein air artwork, which is a drawing created directly on site by direct observation of the barn. Does anybody know where this barn is located? No? No? I'll give you some more clues. Maybe I'll just cut right to the chase. It was the main barn at the Strickler farmhouse property. So that's right behind the York County Jail. So that was the barn there. When Cliff drew it, 1972, it looked like that. So essentially, why is it a bank barn? It's a bank barn because, get this here. Okay, there's an earth embankment there to get up to the main level, which is up here. So bank barns are basically created 2 ways. You have a natural terrain where you have a bank that you can get to the lower level on the downslope side of the barn. On the upslope side, you can go right into the second level. A lot of these barns are on level ground. So to get to the upper level, you have to have earthen embankment put in. So that's the reason it's called a bank barn. Essentially, these barns were very common in Pennsylvania Dutch counties, which York County is included. Now, in the following 1984 photo of the Strickler barn, you'll observe that Cliff did an excellent job in drawing the barn realistically. So the next one is, there's the actual photo. So this is the 1984 photo showing the Strickler barn 2 years before it was torn down. While the barn no longer stands, the Strickler farmhouse does. The farmhouse goes back to 1740 when Ulrich and Mary Strickler constructed the original section. And their descendants added several sections to the farmhouse. It appears the first part of the shown barn was built in the 1830s by their grandson, John Strickler Sr., and his son, John, constructed in addition to the barn shortly after the Civil War. So those are the time periods when this barn was built. Now, the barn itself, Strickler descendants occupied it and farmed the property until it was sold to a neighboring farmer in 1926. Many of the Strickler offspring and some of the nearby neighbors are among the 150 known burials in the Strickler Miller Cemetery on the property. Now, since colonial times, the primary purpose of barns was to house the farm animals and feed to carry the farm animals through the winter. That was the original intent of barns. It was usually the lower floor that served as a secure shelter for the horses, mules, and cattle. The warehouse for their food was on the upper floors. The earthen ramp to the main floor allowed easy storage of plows, harrows, hay rakes, sleighs, farm wagons, threshers, and other farm implements. The main floor was often known as the threshing floor, where that and other farm work could be done under the cover of the barn roof. Now, in zooming into the upper left section of Cliff's drawings, it's a little hard to recognize, but it says York County Institution District, Board of Commissioners. The property was sold to the York County Institution District in 1943, at which time many of the farming and vegetable gardening activities at the county home shifted from the county home barn, which is coming up next, to the Strickler barn. Now, also at the western end of this property, the original section of the York County Prison was opened in 1979. Prison expansions in the late 1980s resulted in the demolition of the Strickler barn in 1986. Now, the next barn we're looking at still stands. This is a present view of the barn built for the county home in 1931. In 1929, the York County Poor District purchased the property where Pleasant Acres now sits. On that property, county buildings for the poor opened in 1930. However, most of the land operated as a county farm with crops and orchards serving as an additional food source for the poor home and for the prison, which was still in York at that time. The barn was built, per the newspaper article of the Times, it said the barn was built to house 4 mules with space for farming implements, farm crop storage, and hay storage for the mules. The county jail prisoners maintained the grounds, plowing the garden and cutting the hay. The county home guests planted and harvested the fruits and vegetables. After York County purchased the Strickler property in 1943, most of the farming and vegetable gardening activities shifted to that location, with the prisoners providing much of the labor, and they started using tractors instead of mules. Now, produce farming activities in the York County Institution District ceased in 1968. After a new medical buildings were opened at the county home in 1950 and a change was made to institutional nursing care, the facilities were renamed Pleasant Acres in 1952, after which this county barn was used and continues to be used by York County for grounds maintenance of county properties in the area, primarily mowing grass and getting rid of the snow in winter. So that's the main use of the barn right now. But like I said, it was originally built to house 4 mules and the hay and also the produce before it was canned. Now, this is a 1937 straight-down aerial photo of the York County home before it became Pleasant Acres. The barn at the county home is pointed out, along with the fruit trees and very large vegetable garden. In terms of present road names, the barn is on the south side of Hindle Road, just east of Davies Drive. So, quite a big vegetable garden. Most of the people that lived in the county home were expected to work in the garden to provide vegetables and fruits. Now, this is another Cliff Satterthwaite drawing used to illustrate not only the York Diner, but also in the background, which was known as the barn. How many shopped at the barn? No, this is on Market Street. Now, I'll let you know where it was. When the barn was converted to commercial business, a news article noted that more than 70 classic windows were added to the barn when it was an agricultural barn, which filled the interior with abundant natural light. Now, Cliff has drawn at least 12 of those windows on the eastern side of the barn. In 1960, that whole York Diner was moved eastward along East Market Street from its location on Memory Lane to the empty lot besides the barn. That's what it looked like in newspaper advertisements at the time. The barn faced Market Street. Also, a large outdoor part of the barn extended beyond the back of the barn. The whole business was billed as York's Garden Center at 2905 East Market Street. Now, if 2905 East Market Street sounds familiar, that's the address of the Home Depot. So if you know where the Home Depot is, that's where the barn was located. Now, when our family moved to Springettsbury Township, 1959, I remember going along with my parents and buying stuff for the house there. So I guess I'm the only one in this, in this group that was in that. It's kind of a big deal at that time. Now, besides supplying, the barn sold lawn and garden equipment, fertilizers, plants, shrubs, trees, mulch, and other landscaping equipment. They also did contract work, where one of their jobs was the grading and seeding of the lawn and planting the shrubs and trees around the newly built East York Elementary School in Haynes Acres. So the business operated from 1956 to 1962, when the barn was demolished to make way for the construction of McCroy Store's office and distribution center. So that's the reason it was taken down. This is one of the few aerial photos I was able to locate for the barn. The 1952 aerial photo shows the barn surroundings before it was used as a garden center. From 1944 to 1952, when Valley Airport was located in the fields behind the barn was used as storage for the tractors, mowers, and rollers to maintain the airport's grass runways. The only building still standing in this aerial photo is the 2914 East Market Street. At that time, it was the Springettsbury Fire Station, which existed from 1931 to 1958. More recently, it was Thirsty's Quick Stop and later a cheesesteak place. However, now it has been closed several years. So that provides the location, and it's actually, the barn was located kind of at the very back corner, almost at the Chick-fil-A in Home Depot. So that's kind of the exact location. Another barn that probably most people will recognize, this barn is now American Daydream Antiques and Miscellanea, which earlier served as the site of Paul Etline's antique business for 54 years. Paul and Dorothy Etline purchased the barn and Victorian house at 3790 East Market Street in 1945. The house was built in 1876 for the Henry Hauser family, and the barn was built in the same time frame. Hauser descendants or their in-laws operated the property as a farm up until the Etline purchase. Paul Etline had antiquing experience prior to repurposing the barn. Just out of high school, he opened his first antique shop behind his parents' home. His business expanded to a city store lot before his 54 years located at that barn. Now, this barn is a bank barn up to Etline's purchase. Paul removed the earthen ramp on the north side of the barn to provide parking for his customers. Now, the upper barn doors were replaced by a large array of windows. So the main door was where all those array of windows are under the antique sign. Now, the earthen ramp is actually able to be pointed out in this 1925 eastward-looking photo of the property at 3790 East Market Street. Even though the house shields the barn, the earthen ramp removed by the Etlines can still be pointed out. Trolleys ran between York and Wrightsville between 1904 and 1933 and passed from the north side of the Lincoln Highway to the south side of the Lincoln Highway, right in front of the Hauser residence. The gas pump in the photo is at the Kreitz Creek Valley Farmers Co-op, which operated in the mill warehouse situated next to the west side of the barn. Framer's Workshop was located there for quite a while. So after their parents passed away, the Etline children decided to sell the late couple's property in 2011. An investor purchased the property at the sale. In 2013, Dollar General viewed the former Etline barn and house as an ideal location to put a new store, and they planned to tear down the barn and house and construct a store. Public outcry resulted in Dollar General changing their minds, and instead they built on an empty lot across from the new Turkey Hill in Stony Brook. So that's the reason the Dollar General ended up right across the street from the First Post. Now, Greg and Maria Kohler acquired the former Etline house and barn in 2018. The Victorian home was mostly original and structurally sound. It was a brick building with deep paneled windows. The original doors, woodwork, and hardware were throughout the 3 floors of the structure. 2 marble and 1 cast iron fireplace from the late 1700s were added to the existing fireplaces as antiques by the Entlines. So almost every room has a fireplace, although only a few are operational. The house was properly restored by the Kohlers to keep in character with the original structure. Now, this has been the residence of the Kohler family since 2018. The barn has sat unused for 18 years since Paul Etline retired. It would require much more work before their antique business could open. However, after 7 months of restoration, of stabilizing, restoring the barn, they actually have to rebuild one entire wall, entirely rewired, and bringing the barn up to modern building codes. American Daydream Antiques and Miscellanea opened for business on June 1st, 2019. So here are Maria and Greg Kohler at the front desk of the American Daydream business. If it had not been for their efforts to restore the barn and actually use it for a business, who knows if this barn might have been lost forever, because it probably would have been developed as a site. The couple looks at the property as a lifelong investment. And interest in antiques goes back to their grandparents' fondness for antiques. Years earlier, Maria and Greg started American Daydream by selling part-time, by selling antiques via eBay, Facebook, and the like. After gaining an understanding of what people want, they realized their dream could become a full-time business. So how many have visited the American Daydream? Quite a few, good. Here's a view after the Bob's Big Boy was placed in front of the barn. It supposedly has become a very popular place for selfies. Where is this stone barn located? North Hills Road is correct, because at 1960, Industrial Highway did not connect with North Hills Road yet. Trick question. The newspaper photo from November of 1960 shows a car zooming south on the newly opened North Hills Road at the railroad crossing. The underpass bridge that previously occupied that place, it was a single-lane traffic bridge underneath the railroad tracks, had been filled in because it had become a bottleneck. Just think of a single lane now on that road. 2 years later, Industrial Highway would extend to connect with North Hills Road at this location. In 1960, this barn had long since been converted from farm use to serve as a warehouse. And a loading dock on the shown side of the barn was in place already to make it easier to offload and load trucks. So here's a closer view. This closer view basically shows it as still a warehouse in 2019, however, just about ready to be torn down. And I'll tell you why. The barn was built in the early 1800s, transitioning away from farm use in the early 1900s, when it was used to store building materials during the development of the old East York neighborhood. The barn was sold to R.S. Noonan General Contracting Firm in 1952, after which it served as a central equipment storage location for their construction projects in the area. John H. Myers and Son procured the barn in 1971, and it served as a warehouse for their flooring center, which was built with the showroom built adjacent to the barn. Finally, in 1995, the barn served as a warehouse for Gone and Stombaugh, operating a plumbing, heating, and air conditioning business on the site. Now here is a west end of the barn, which sat along North Hills Road. And the south side of the barn, at the right side of this photo, that contained the entrance to the lower level, which during the 1800s was used to house livestock. The wood structure overhanging the lower entrance to the barn is known as the forebay. Have you ever wondered what was behind those tiny windows in the stone end of this barn? Well, you're in luck. I have a picture. So that's what it looked like inside that barn on the floor level, next to those windows that looked out onto North Hills Road. Now, most of the materials and shelving has already been removed in preparation for demolition of this barn. Now, the yellow arrow points out the upper floor seen from the main floor. The upper floor was actually installed during the time that John H. Myers and Sons used the barn as a warehouse for their flooring center. This view is on the upper floor at the northwest corner of the barn. The lower chord of the roof rafter plane sits on a 20-inch thick stone walls. The significant decrease in stone laying quality at the highest elevation suggests the barn was at some point in time increased to the present height, probably by the farmer himself. If you look at the laying of the stones on the left side of this, it's pretty rugged looking. But essentially, the evidence suggests also that the earlier roof was a wood shake roof. Wood pegs hold together the massive hand-hewn timber beams. The wood stringers for attaching the wood shake and the shingles were machine sawed by an up and down sash type sawmill. So these are very primitive beams, and they were very much sought out to be repurposed when this barn was taken down, which they were. In this view, looking up, the roof framework contains no center ridge beam. Now here's a view of the north side and west side of the barn. It is an introduction to the next slide, which will focus on the corner shown at the bottom center of the photo. So looking at that corner, you'll see that North Hills Road past that corner of the barn with almost no berm in the road. The ever-widening North Hills Road with heavy truck traffic with virtually no road berm compromised the integrity of the barn's west end wall. Cracks in the stonework continually appeared, with the occasional stones falling on the berm or the roadway. The barn was also in the path associated with the future, at that time, I-83 expansion work, now underway. So it was decided it should be a safety issue of the falling stones mainly was responsible for demolishing the barn in 2019. Although, like I said, the barn timber was repurposed. The owner found readily buyers to purchase those beams. Now, who remembers these barns along Mount Rose Avenue? They stood there until 1965. We have a couple there. Now, in 1962, Cliff Shatherwaith drew these twin barns that sat along the north side of Mount Rose Avenue between Haynes Road and ID3. Now, to better orient you with regard to Cliff's viewpoint along Haynes Roads, when he created this drawing, I'll use a 1964 aerial photo, then return to this artwork for further explanation. So at the top, 1964 straight down aerial photo. with road names annotated. At the upper right, that is the southwest corner of Haynes Road, of Haynes Acres, which parts of Eastwood Drive and Wharton Road shown. I-83 opened at this area in 1959. So if you look at the development around the corner of Haynes Road and Mount Rose Avenue, all you had is these barns and the former Amig Hotel, which I talked about at the last history night. Now, essentially, using this aerial photo, I've added yellow viewing direction arrows to indicate that Cliff was along Haynes Road when he created this drawing of the twin barns. He drew that from the north, in other words, he drew the north ends of the barns, the ends away from Mount Rose Avenue. At the bottom of the slide is a 1956 bird's eye view showing the Mount Rose Avenue side of the twin barns. Between the barns at the lower level was a corral that was accessed by a lane from Haynes Road, which I marked there toward the middle of the screen. The building to the west side of the barns of the 1956 bird's eye view was the Solomon Amig's Hotel, which opened in 1847. After Solomon Amig died in 1880, he already had a wealthy son, Emanuel Amig, that inherited the hotel and surrounding property. A news article from 1883 has Emanuel Amig opening a mule and horse trading business. The twin barns were likely built in the early 1800s to facilitate that business. So back to Cliff's drawing. The main floors were at the elevation of the present Mount Rose Avenue, and the lower floors were accessed from a corral located between the mirror image barns and at an elevation that would eventually be about at the Kmart parking lot level. So you understand how he created this. It's like you had easy access straight in to the corral from that lower level, and the upper level was already up in the Mount Rose Avenue elevation. Now, the twin barns became the site of Joe Kindig Sr.'s horse trading business in 1916, when he moved that business from the city. As with a lot of Cliff's sketches that he creates on site, afterwards, he takes that sketch and creates a painting. So he later used that drawing sketch as a guide to create this painting shown in this slide. The twin barns were built in the early 1800s and replaced by a mobile gas station in 1965. The first service station built in that corner. Right after that, there was a Sunoco built where the Rudders is now, and then 2 years after that, there was an Esso station on the other corner that was torn down. I guess that was torn down when they started the widening project, or the ID3 redevelopment project for Mountain Rose Avenue and ID3. Now, who remembers Brick End Barns? If you ever dined at Wiener World Restaurant at 2310 Industrial Highway, if you looked across the highway up until 1997, you might have caught glimpses of the wooden upper side of this barn containing the forebay, which faced Industrial Highway. This type of barn was known as a brick end barn. The openings in the brick ends were not just decorative. They also provided the barn interior with ventilation and some natural light. The creation of these designs was generally left up to the skilled bricklayers of the day. Each barn seemed to provide new inspiration in varying arrangements, and as a result, nearly every brick end barn has its own character. The shown brick end faces the west. Now, Jacob Meyer had this barn built in the 1820s. This 1930 bird's eye view photo provides a location and shows the surrounding outbuildings and farmhouse associated with this barn. Brothers Jacob and John Meyer owned properties on opposite sides of the common lane leading to their farms, which, according to family history, they named Elias's Memory Lane in honor of their father, Elias Meyer. Several decades later, it became a public road, simply named Memory Lane. So that's how Memory Lane got its name, from Elias's Memory Lane to simply Memory Lane. In about 1920, it was about 1920 that John Meyer had a brick barn built on his property on the east side of Memory Lane. The family history indicated Jacob Meyer and his brick barn was built a few years later, as shown on the west side of Memory Lane. Their brick barns, according to family history, their brick barns were supposedly identical. So I spent a lot of time trying to find photos of both. I had good photos of this one, but I didn't have for the other one. But I eventually found it. So this is a 1948 south side and east side view of the barn. These are from photos taken by Robert Lewis of Washington, D.C. in 1948. His hobby was photographing brick end barns. His collection, including this photo, was used in a 1955 Pennsylvania Dutch folklore publication by Franklin and Marshall College. Most of the York County brick end barn photos from that collection are now housed in the collections of the York County History Center. There's a wide variety of decorations on the end. I didn't see any two that were the same. So finding the other barn now was kind of a chore of mine that I spent a lot more time than I should have. The Myers brother had the only brick, according to what I was able to discover, the Myers brothers had the only two brick end barns in Springettsbury Township. So here's a 1997 view of the south side and east side of Jacob Myers' brick end barn. In this view, you can clearly see that the forebay on the south side is not supported by any posts, which was traditional for most barns of that era. They used cantilever beams coming out of the barn structure to support the wood forebay. This view shows a small part of the east side. However, primarily the north side of the brick barn is shown with the earthen ramp leading up so farm equipment can enter the main floor of the barn. Note that the brickwork extends around the corner. So you have the brickwork here, wrong one. So you have the brickwork here. This doesn't work most of the time. Okay, so you have brickwork here actually goes around, besides the end, it goes around and on this side of the barn, and it actually is on this side over here. So you have, usually the brick end barns are strictly brick end because they're very expensive to make. Most cases, and it's actually all the cases, they use an oversized brick that's custom made at the job site. So you have a bricklayer and a brick maker that actually camps out at the job site to create these brick ends barns. They cut, like I say, custom sized bricks. So this is a view of the top of the west end of the barn. After 175 years, even with all the building gaps, the brickwork was still in good condition on this side. However, brick in the section on the east side has softened and was deteriorating, which occasionally happened. You get a batch of bricks that the brick maker wasn't paying attention, or the brick, or something happened. So you get sites in the barns that some of these brick end barns that you have soft bricks. The owner in 1948 noted this about that section. He said, "Birds peck on the soft bricks to soften their bills, or sharpen their bills." So bricks are always pecking on the other side of the barn. That's the reason it has deteriorated, and the vines are eating away at it at this time. Now, here is an inside view of the barn showing the brick end. Edgecombe steel needed to expand. They had owned this property since 1950. So they simply let the barn sit by itself on their property until 1997, when they needed to expand. They had an agreement with a buyer to repurpose the beams and the woodwork. And the dismantling began in October of 1997. The agreement was for Paul Fiera to reassemble the barn once he found a suitable site. In the meantime, he would store it. I've not discovered where it ended up, so who knows where the woodwork for this barn ended up. Now, on the other side of Memory Lane, the other brother, John Meyer, built his barn, like I said, on the east side of Memory Lane about 1820. Several years later, it was when his brother, Jacob Meyer, built the supposedly identical brick end barn, which is the barn I just reviewed in the 1997 photos. Up until a few weeks ago, the best photo discovered showing the John Meyer barn was this 1951 bird's eye photo, which is worthless in verifying the type of barn John Meyer had. The barn was torn down in 1952 when construction started on the Caterpillar manufacturing plant, which ended up in this field. Now, several weeks ago, a group of early Caterpillar plant-related photos were donated to our committee. One aerial photo provided the other clue that I needed. So if you zoom in on the north side, and more importantly, the west side of the John Meyer barn, the brick ends of the Meyer brothers are nearly identical. Both use the hourglass bracketed by diamond pattern in the arrangement, except for one area. Now, after John Meyer built his barn, you see the pattern. Jacob Meyer, probably his wall was going up, and at the last minute he said, "I'm going to add something different than my brothers." So he added that detail at the top that made it different than his brothers. But other than that, it's nearly identical. Everything, even the windows below, have the same placement. Now, this is unusual. It's like in going through all the brick and barn photos at the History Center, I didn't see any barns that were this close together. They were all very unique patterns. Where are these barns located? Avalon, Meadowbrook, along. Yep. These barns are when I said I was talking about barns, the number one question I always got, are you going to include the Avalon barn? Are you going to include anything about how old it actually was? And it's like, yes. I found some neat stuff in reviewing this. Now, this is an early, like I said, these barns were located on Whiteford Road, which would be just out of view to the right side of this Library of Congress photo. So this is from the collections of the Library of Congress. These barns are commonly known as both Meadowbrook Barns, Avalon Farms Barn, or the Falstaff Outlet Barns. So I'll get to that later. But first, a few photos from the Avalon time. Now, this is an early 1960s photo of the Avalon Home delivery milk trucks around the west side of the Avalon Farms dairy barns. The milk house is in the forefront at the northwest corner of the main barn. Now, who had milk, Avalon milk, delivered to their house? At one time, my family did. We only did for like one year. We usually had rudders. Who purchased Avalon milk at their dairy bar? Yeah, more people. Yep. Now, this is an overall photo of the whole north side of the main barn of the Avalon Farms dairy bar. I pointed out where the Whitewood Road runs in front of the north side of the main barn. This is a brick barn, it's a bank barn with earthen ramps allowing direct access to the second floor. If you look at the barn itself, let's see, let me get the wrong one. So we have an earthen ramp over here to this door and also to this one. So this barn was so long that they had two earthen ramps on either side of the silos. So this is one of the longer barns in York County, according to newspaper articles. Back to this photo. Now, this photo, like I said, is in the collections of the Library of Congress. MP Walcott took this photo in June of 1939 for the United States Farm Security Administration. He went around the country to photograph various barns. At the time the photo was taken, the farm owner was Harold Robertson. He called the barn to the south of the main barn, that is the barn to the left side of the photo, the south barns, you know. So they were the main barn and the south barn, which made it easy to describe the two barns as I go forward. Now, in researching this talk, I noticed a short article in a dairyman's trade publication during November of 1939. Quote, Harold Robinson's prize herd of dairy cattle in York, PA, escaped a fire which destroyed the upper part of his main barn. The barn raising is progressing rapidly, end quote. So just a few months after this photo, there was a fire in the main barn. And via newspapers.com resource, it was quickly learned the fire got front page coverage in local newspapers. So the 1939 fire is shown here. Now, when I brought this up to various people about the fire in 1939, he said, no, the fire was in the late 70s. I said, no, there's one in 1939 also. So this article here, the day following the October 31st, 1939 fire, the Gazette and Daily had this photo on the front page. Articles in local newspapers reported that while the upper part was destroyed, the lower part, built of stone, concrete, and steel flooring, was not damaged, and reported the barn was built in 1934 to replace a barn destroyed by fire. So this barn, these Avalon barns were built in 1934. So I'll go back further research and show why. Further reporting, they noted none of the surrounding structures were damaged, including the south barn, except for scorched paint and some damaged roof tiles. Now, at that time, the stream that runs by the barn, and it flowed very rapidly. So evidently, by putting in all the retention ponds uphill from that, decreased the flow, so it's just a trickle now. But at that time, it was flowing rapidly. And the fire companies were able to quickly dam it up and have enough fire to fight the blaze, protect the surrounding properties. But this one, they didn't. But it was rebuilt in a matter of 2 weeks. So Like they didn't have to, they only had to clean up the foundation. So they built it up identical, but not quite identical. Because if you notice one area here, you see a couple different changes between the barns. Like this area here, above where the entrance is off the ramp, if you go back, it's hard to see. Yeah, well, you see they put a little eave over it, and some of the windows are just a little bit different. So you can see the differences now that you know that that was destroyed in 39. This is the one rebuilt after 39, put it that way. So you had that fire. So in December 1938, I was looking for the earliest photos of the Avalon barns. That if you recognize the barns here that I pointed out, so the barns here are basically the shape of the barns that we recognize from our time. So in 1938 at this time, he was using one of the barns on the property to sell turkeys. So he'd sell Thanksgiving turkeys and Christmas turkeys. So this is advertising, come and get your Christmas turkeys at Robertson's Farms property. And you can also see this is the Avalon Mansion here. So in 1934, I was looking around for various photos of the before the 1934 fire. So this is a 1920s photo that Harold Robertson had that he used as promotional things for. He purchased the property in 1919, the Meadowbrook property that had formerly been developed by Edwin Myers. In the 1920s, Harold Robertson regularly hosted local and visiting Rotarians, Grangers, and dairy groups. A highlight of the tour were the Meadowbrook barns, which Robertson transformed into a modernly equipped dairy operation. The aerial photo is from a Robertson Farms promotional piece from the 1920s. In it, the Meadowbrook Mansion, now Christmas Tree Hill, is in the lower left. The fire at Robertson Farms on July 7th, 1934, destroyed both Robertson Farms dairy barns, which were the former Meadowbrook barns from the early 1900s. After which Robertson had new dairy barns built, with the lower parts made of stone containing concrete and steel flooring, which were noted surviving the 1939 fire. So this is the only photo that I've been able to locate showing the original Meadowbrook barns, although there may be others to be discovered, since Harold Robertson supplied promotional scenes which were shown at local moving picture houses, including the Hip and the Wizard Theater in York. The advertisements appeared for their movies in 1926 that Robertson Farms will be showcased in this viewing. And they showcased the home, which is the Meadowbrook Mansion, the dairy operations, and the dairy herd. So there are other aerial photos out there. It's just a matter of finding them. Now, like I said, I was asked many times if the Avalon barn would be included in this talk. And when I shared there was a 1939 fire, the common retort was, no, the only fire was in the late 70s. So there are, in fact, two fires. The October 31st, 1939 fire, which destroyed the upper part of the main barn, and the October 28th, 1978 fire, which was more destructive to the main barn. In this photo from the York Dispatch, they inserted a large white arrow showing the ruins of the main barn, which was never rebuilt. However, the south barn survived another fire beside it. So it had a lucky streak going for it, that south barn. So, like I said, it survived the 78 fire. Avalon basically got rid of their dairy herd a year later. And the next use of the south barn was the False Graph Factory Outlet, which operated there from 1985 to 2008. Now, many remember the south barn repurposed as the False Graph Factory Outlet. Who shopped there? Ooh, a lot of people. After the factory outlet closed in 2008, there were a lot of efforts to acquire another tenant for the barn, but they all did not work out. We have heard that the owners wanted higher than market rates for another rental client. Here is the ground floor of the former outlet store. This view looks up from the ground floor to a second floor banister. And here is the west section of the second floor. We also heard that 2 craft beer brewery pubs were interested in repurposing the barn. They both said it's like a lot of the work is already done for us. It's like this would be a neat place to move in. They both said it would allow easily adding a live music element. However, they always ran into some other issues, such as the additional things that they had to do to it. But a lot of it was they didn't have enough parking spaces that the township required. So neither of those venues went forward. Here is the north section of the second floor. In 2012, the initial proposal was made to demolish the barn to create a lot for a branch bank, which was not agreeable to a lot of people in the township. However, they had their way, and the demolition permit was granted. So our committee was allowed inside to document the barn, which these photos are from. Here is the loft area above the second floor, with both an inside and outside view of the gable end. So, on March 21st, 2013, the last upper walls of the structure fell on this 79-year-old barn. So we now know for sure it was built in 1934. Within weeks of the branch bank of Susquehanna Bank opening at the 2900 Whiteford Road address, BB&T purchased Susquehanna Bank, and it became a branch bank of BB&T. For several years, they had very few customers at that site, so they simply closed that branch down in 2019. It has been sitting vacant ever since. Where is this barn located? Pleasant Valley Road. You're one of the owners, right? Yeah. I was walking by the barn in 2001, and I saw this Amishman up there. I said, for my first thought, oh, going over to Lancaster County. We're losing another barn. But how wrong I was. Now, basically, this barn is, it's a neat barn. It has a lot of history. It goes back to the early 1830s. And you can see up here, they are actually doing, I guess you started a new roof, and then you discovered some of the timbers were cracked or broken, because the barn always had a little dip in it in the roof. So you decided to fix the barn. And I think I talked to somebody on site, and he said there was a sawmill in southern Lancaster County that actually created the replacement beams up there, the timbers in the barn. They did a nice job. So this is the other end of it. It shows a nice view with the roof off of what a brick end barn or a stone barn looks like. It's a neat barn. Actually, it was expanded. So when they expand barns, usually they build it of another type as a cost saving. So the eastern end of the barn is actually a frame barn. And the brick end is now in the middle of the barn on the east side. So it's kind of a neat barn. But the neat thing about this is basically you have the barn sits along Pleasant Valley Road at Alpine Road. Now, it was repaired by Todd and Melinda Waldemeyer, who are sitting over there, for use by Todd's Landscaping Company. Now, Todd's is actually an acronym for Total Outdoor Design Solutions. So, neat. If you need landscaping done, go see their business. And actually, I think you had to go through a variance actually to keep that business there, didn't you? Yes. Yeah. And a lot of neighbors showed up to support their getting a variance to keep the barn there. So another couple that saved a barn. Thank you. Yeah. So how many stone barns are still standing in Springettsbury Township? Now, that may be another talk that I do. So I basically have talks lined up for the next 2 years, so coming up for like 3 years from now, that's potentially another topic. So there's no end of the topics I can talk about. So this is a summary of the talks that I did, or the barns, the sites that I looked at. Now, when I talk about wood barns, wood type of barns, they're the dominant barn. What makes a wood barn, the dominant outer walls around the main floor are either wood, stone, or brick. So that makes it like the three classifications. The walls around the ground floor are almost always made of stone, either partially or completely around the barn to serve as the barn's foundation. The standing column is yes if the barn still stands, and if not, the year is given when the last barn was when the last barn on that property was torn down. So you see, like 3 of the 10 barns that I talked about are still standing. And the main reason they still stand and people put money into them, they're utilized as a business, except the one for the York County home. The York County owns that barn, and it houses their lawn maintenance equipment for the various properties they own in that area. So if you see a barn that you want to put money in, you have to have a business or something to support putting the money into it. So it's like, I enjoyed putting this talk together, and I hope you enjoyed this talk. So thanks for your attention. Right on time. Thank you.